All rise for the Honorable Judge Pametti. Oyez, oyez, oyez.
Good morning. Calling the case of the people of remakes, reboots, and revivals versus Perry Mason. Are both sides ready?
I am ready for the people, Your Honor.
All right. Welcome back to Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals, where we are discussing the latest reboot of Perry Mason.
Perry Mason. Who knew this show from the 1950s that your grandparents probably loved would get a reboot on HBO, no less?
Yeah, seriously, that's on everybody's lips right now. So we had to talk about it. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Rolando.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals.
An original podcast
about
unoriginality.
All right, so welcome back. It's been a while. It's almost the end of summer. It's been a long, hot summer over here, but I am ready for fall, especially all the things that fall is going to bring me. I'm like ready for it.
Do you think fall is going to bring all those great things, considering,
COVID?
I'm
talking from a real selfish place. It's bringing me a new apartment. It's bringing me pumpkin spice flavors, so I'm cool with that.
Oh, you're a basic bish, huh?
I am. That's the most basic thing about me. I really love pumpkin.
I'm so impartial to pumpkin. I don't understand the disdain it has, but I'm not necessarily crazy gung ho about it.
Yeah, I mean, anything that has a strong following, people are just have really big adversal to. How about you, Eddie? Do you like pumpkin spice?
I do.
It's pretty good. It's more interesting than caramel and mocha, in my opinion. It's got a kick to it. But.
Yeah, I will say this. I do have a fabulous recipe for pumpkin spiced French toast. Yeah. And it uses less pumpkin spice than it does actual pumpkin puree, so it's not really maybe pumpkin spice.
Oh, okay. But it's pumpkin.
It's pumpkin.
Yeah, pumpkin's a great flavor. It's an underrated flavor.
Well,
technically not.
No, not in the fall.
Not anymore, yeah.
Yeah.
But enough about pumpkin. Today we're discussing Perry Mason. How familiar were you with the idea with the Perry Mason franchise?
I would say I was aware of it. I never necessarily watched it. So Perry Mason is one of those things that is constantly on reruns on. I want to say the channel is MeTV. At least here in the New York metro area. Yes. And I don't know. Usually I would end up on that channel if I was watching something on demand, and then when I get out, somehow for some reason it'd be on MeTV, and it's always usually Perry Mason, and it's usually him monologuing in a courtroom, and I'm just like, what is this black and white TV show monologuing in court? And maybe I listen to a couple minutes, and it's usually a very impassioned speech, and then I change it. Outside of that was my only recollection of Perry Mason. But I think I remember one time telling Eddie, she's like, man, TV shows were so interesting. This is what they found interesting.
Back then.
This is what they found entertaining.
Yeah. Well, so I didn't really know Perry Mason. I didn't know whether he was a lawyer or a federal investigator or just a private investigator. Okay. And it turns out he's kind of all of those things.
Well, yeah, that's the more incredulous part about this whole idea of Perry Mason.
Yes, but he's also, depending on which Perry Mason too, he's more traditional than I kind of my impression of him was. And I'm talking more so about the 50s one.
So what do you mean impression? I already forgot the word you said.
Traditional.
What do you mean traditional? Thank you.
Oh, in the sense where he's just very by the book, and as a character, he wasn't there was no special quirks about him. He didn't really have any big characteristics other than
being charismatic.
The fact that he was a good lawyer.
I think he was also. I thought he was kind of charismatic. He tries to be witty and funny, when he's answering the phone, talking to people. I think he might have been a little. I don't know. I found him so while rewatching some of the shows, especially in the first episode for sure.
So what's the first episode you saw?
The first episode was the very first episode. What was it?
Oh, you saw the first episode. Okay.
Yeah, because they're available on. They were on Hulu, and they're also available on CBS All Access.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I have neither, so I watched them through my YouTube TV, and they're available on Sundance TV. Apparently, Sundance reruns Perry Mason. So these are your options,
those hipsters
guys.
love themselves some old stuff.
That's It's incredibly true.
I know, right? What an apt.
Yes. But maybe we should back up and talk a little history about Perry Mason. So did you guys know that Perry Mason is based on a lot of novels?
I actually am aware of this. Did you know that those are I want to say number 2 or number 3 best-selling novel series?
3.
Number 3.
Do you know what they're behind?
Harry Potter and
Goosebumps.
Goosebumps. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
Harry
so
Potter's
crazy
number
that
1.
Goosebumps is
2.
still on that list.
Yeah, seriously, but there's a lot of Goosebumps, so that makes sense.
I think what's more interesting for me is that the top 2 are children's novels, right? Like they're aimed for kids, and then like somehow number 3 has managed to be consistently then for adults. That means that at a certain point before those 2 properties, it was number 1.
That is very true. Yeah, I think at one point it was number 1. And being that in a previous episode when we did Murder on the Orient Express, we said that Agatha Christie is the best-selling author or has sold the most like copies of her books other than say the Bible and Shakespeare. It just people love a good mystery.
Yeah.
The people love mystery books and crime books. So Perry Mason is a character that was developed and written by Eric Gardner Stanley. He first created it in a book from 1933 called The Case of the Velvet Claws. And his last book he wrote in 1969. So it's decades he wrote for this character in 80 books. Yeah, and the last book was The Case of the Fabulous Fake. The novels were always labeled as The Case of. And
it's true. They did have they had like that
commonly,
kind of, like the Hardy Boys.
With alliterations, yes, just like the Hardy Boys. And also probably, this is also the era of Raymond Chandler writing books and Dashiell Hammett. These men have created a lot of like the film noir characters, Sam Spade,
the hard-boiled characters,
Philip Marlowe, the hard-boiled like private
detective
investigators and detectives.
Which is so I actually wanted to talk about that a little because I've confused that terminology. So just because something is hard-boiled, it doesn't necessarily make it when it comes into film noir. They're very closely associated, but not necessarily one and the same thing. So I made that mistake before on this podcast talking about when I meant hard-boiled, talking about film noir.
Yeah, and, that's hard-boiled. I feel like is more for the literary world, and film noir is obviously for film.
Yeah, but I think film noir,
but they're so closely related.
Yeah, but I think character could be, you could be a hard-boiled character and not necessarily be in a film noir. Yeah. So yeah.
100% right.
So I'm just here cleaning up my messes.
But so to continue, he also was part of short stories. I believe Perry Mason actually was first written. They were first published in newspaper articles, and so you would read them as kind of like serials. And then he started making books and novels, and they were so popular.
They were.
The books were kind of formulaic. They usually involve a client's murder trial, and typically Mason It's not so much a whodunit where you're wondering who did it the whole time, and at the end, it was him. It's more so there's someone who is thought of to be guilty, and Perry Mason comes in and proves their innocence.
Right, he does his job as an attorney.
An attorney, yeah. And he usually implicates someone else, and they confess. So he usually is like, it wasn't you, it was you. So, and that's kind of like every episode that I saw that happen too.
It was, yes. This is, they're formulaic.
Very formulaic,
and
yes.
This show would be the granddaddy to all police procedurals that we would see going forward.
Well, we're still technically in the books.
What?
We're still technically in the books. We're not on the show.
Oh, well, yeah. But yeah. Yes. But in terms of the book, though, I know the author himself was a lawyer, right? So that's where he got a lot of his writing. And a common theme to the novels was actually police corruption. But, like, his books were not necessarily political. They were more just trying to kind of almost not shine a light, put lawyers on a pedestal, right? Those practicing attorney law as like greater than the ones who enforce law, and not very political. However, I think that might be why this show kind of has been able to age well. This character might be able to age well, and I guess we'll talk about that when we talk about the HBO series.
Well, so full discretion, I've not read any of the books. This is just me doing some research on it, and I don't want to focus too much on the books, but I do know that a lot of times there were some criticisms because the cops came off as incompetent. And that even translated into the show. Like there was like a lot of like people who were like, why do you always portray cops as like incompetent? And
wow, who's complaining? The cops?
Probably. And
Wow.
just admirers of, but
Surprise, surprise. I mean, let's be. We were talking about this last episode when we did the true crime, unsolved mysteries,
unsolved
right?
mysteries, yes.
And criminal justice itself is like very flawed, right? And that's kind of the beauty of it. But
Yeah.
the on in terms of the enforcement side, like there is like all these mistakes that constantly, people are hired to do their job, and their job is to prosecute, right? They don't
Hmm.
care who it is. It's a matter of getting someone to be punished for this crime, whether they're wrongfully convicted or not. All these stories are about those wrongful convictions. All these stories are about usually cops or DAs trying to get someone behind bars despite the fact
Exactly.
that that's not justice, right? And Perry Mason becomes this bastion of hope for this idea of justice, right? Trying to
Hmm.
make sure that no one is wrongfully committed for, convicted
Yes.
of a crime.
And also a voice for the people, like for
Mm-hmm.
people who feel like they don't have a voice and who is kind of like speaking for them and listening to them.
Yeah.
The fact that the book came out in 1933 too, it just sets up that this was in the era of the Great Depression. Um, Corruption was kind of becoming more evident. With Hollywood and all the scandals that were going on, the world was just kind of like changing its whole outlook on life. And so they wanted to create a character that people could actually not only relate to but look up to.
Right. And
And I think
oh, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say that relationship really did get solidified, I think, when the television show happened.
Of course, I would agree with you. I think to go back to the criticisms for the book,
Hmm.
to my understanding, the other criticism now for the book is obviously the flat women, or the flat written women, right? So you're either a
Is that
saint.
now or was that then?
That was no. This is the criticisms obviously now.
Yes.
When you're looking at hard-boiled books like this of the past, right? And keep in
Mhm.
mind, these are a product of their time. But the women were either saints or whores, right? There's
Yeah.
no middle ground here. And the other thing is, like, Perry Mason himself as a character apparently has dropped the N word of more than 5 times, right?
Yeah.
Again, product of its time. However,
Mhm.
kind of muddies the waters when you're looking at your character as just like this beacon of hope, and it's just like, well, he has a pretty flawed past, as do
Yeah.
history tells us our forefathers do in this country. So,
Exactly. And beacon of hope for whom? Which is
fair.
a question. To
Well, I think that's
ask.
an important
Anything.
question when we're watching
Yes.
this show. So I think we should jump on to talk about this show.
Definitely. Okay, the show debuted in 1957 and it lasted until 1966. It was a huge success. It starred Raymond Burr. And Raymond Burr, you might know him for being the villain in Rear Window. You might know him for being in the Americanized version of Godzilla. You might know him from being in the pilot episode of Unsolved Mysteries. He was the host for the pilot episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, was he really?
Yes.
It all connects.
But you most likely know him as Perry Mason.
That's okay. Our audience probably has no idea who's like who.
Yeah, if you do know him, you most likely know him as Perry Mason or the bad guy in Rear Window. It's from the golden age of television, and it's a legal drama series, one of the first, definitely the most successful when it came out, ran on CBS, and it laid a foundation for pretty much every legal drama that has come since. I mean, when I watched this, I was like, oh my God, this is just like Law and Order. I was kind of mesmerized by that. It always begins with showing you a crime that takes place from different points of views and the different characters you're going to meet. Then you go to Perry Mason and when he gets involved. And at least from the episodes that I saw, there's always some investigating that Perry Mason does himself before it goes into court. And sometimes it doesn't even go into court, which is why Perry Mason is not only a lawyer, he's an investigator, even though he has an investigator, Paul Drake, that works for him. And he has an assistant that does as much as he does, Della Street. And these are two characters that were introduced in the first novel, that he met them for the first time in the first novel, and they were in every book subsequent and in the TV show. He always just ends up doing it himself, like solving the case, or at least like saying, no, this person's not guilty, this person's innocent. And it's usually like somebody does a slip up or like says something or shows something, and then it's like, aha, and he solves the pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's just interesting, right? Because I don't know. I mean, so any lawyers out there that listen to the show, I'm assuming you guys aren't doing a lot of your investigations. Most of the lawyering is writing up reports, briefs, looking for crime law, making sure, what is suppressed. I feel like a lot of legal work tends to be more cutting through red tape than it is
Mm-hmm.
actual investigating. So this really glamorizes what it's like to be a lawyer. This show.
It does. I think so too. And it also, I don't know. I think it also kind of like, what does a lawyer do? The fact that it's very much like Perry Mason is, I think, almost part of the category of detective fiction. And are lawyers also detectives? Like, how much do they do that? I know that sometimes they usually have someone who does some detective work for them so that they can know what they're arguing on and stuff. But like, he's all across the board. Like, he's doing everything.
Yes.
This guy doesn't sleep, and poor Della's at his side all of the time.
Oh,
I thought Della was his wife, but it's just his assistant that he literally drags everywhere. So that was also just like, okay, what's going on? Like, that's why I was like, what is Perry Mason? What does he do? So I don't know. I mean, I don't practice law, so tell me how much investigating actually happens. Please, someone let us know. But
Please
it was
let us know, our lawyer friends out there.
Yes, we have so many. Apparently, not.
Who knows?
But a lot of the episodes are actually based on stories written by Gardner himself, and the episodes always had the title "The Case of Blank Blank." So it was very much. Say that again.
No, I'm trying. Do you remember any of the cases that you watched?
Yes. The case of the vagabond vixen, the case of the runaway corpse.
We saw.
These are the case of the Crimson Kiss.
Oh, okay.
These
so
are
you
some
saw.
of the
All right. So you
episodes
saw.
I
All right.
watched.
So we did not see. So we didn't have overlap in terms of the episodes that we saw. I saw
We
the
did
case.
not.
All right. So the case of the haunted husband.
Ooh.
The case of the perjured parrot, right? And that one had the voice. The parrot's voice was voiced by the guy who does Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd. No, not Mel Brooks.
Mel Blanc.
Mel Blanc. Thank you. Yes, he did the voice of the parrot in this episode.
Oh wow!
I'm trying to think of what that was. I saw the first episode. I don't remember the name of the case, but hang on. And the moth-eaten mink. So I looked up at a list of like what are the episodes I should watch for Perry Mason, and this one is an episode that comes up. So case of the moth mink, and most of these were from the first season too, to make my life easier. But case of the moth mink happened to be the first of the
I watched
episodes.
a lot from the first season too. I'm surprised we didn't overlap.
But there were a lot. I mean, these are like when seasons were 22, 24 episodes long, and
they're still like that.
well, they are, but like these are also hour-long episodes, and like
Yeah.
I'm going to be totally forthcoming. The courtroom scenes could be very, very tedious and boring. I think, in my opinion, from an entertainment standpoint, I'm just like, it's just monologuing, and I don't need this. Like, just do it like Law and Order. Just give me the impassioned closing remarks. Or like any like scandalous evidence that comes out. I don't need to see like necessarily the whole trial, despite the fact that I understand that this is what he does as a character, right? Like this is and this is literally why people were watching the show, because they were fascinated by this.
For sure.
But yeah, the moth-eaten mink. That is the first episode.
Great title.
First episode that was actually based off of the novels, one of the novels.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So I think when the show debuted, Eric Gardner Stanley must have been at least like 50 to 60 novels in, and they had over 200 episodes of the show. So a lot of it they had to just kind of like make up themselves. And because of it, they contributed to the myth of Perry Mason a little bit more effectively than Eric Stanley Gardner's own books did. I mean, also, but Perry Mason was popular before the TV show. There were movies that came out. There were 6 films that had come out as like a series of films in the 30s.
Before the TV show?
Before the TV show.
You're right.
And there was
Yes,
a radio
yes.
series
Right.
that Raymond Burr also, I think, participated in.
Okay.
So Perry Mason was kind of like this fixture in popular culture. I think this just like was the definitive one up until that point. I think it's actually, as a person who is pretty well versed in mystery shows, I'm a big fan of Murder, She Wrote, and I've watched Law and Order a bunch of times. Just like other shows like this.
And you
I was
praised
surprised-
Scooby-Doo when we did that
I praised
episode.
Scooby-Doo because of the murder mystery elements to it. I was just surprised at how, like, this is the template that I'm so familiar with. This is the template that I've seen so many times, and it held up in some ways.
Oh no, I agree with you. This show, look, it's not a show that I'm going to continue watching ever. Again, forthcoming. However, in terms of standing up, like it is a show that does hold up.
I think so.
I understand why there are reruns from this show. First of all, I mean, all right, I'm gonna let you go and then I'll go. But go.
I think that the formula, it really works. I think that just having like everyone loves a good mystery.
Mm-hmm.
So just like having the plot always moving forward, and even if you know that like Perry Mason is going to be triumphant in the end, and that he's going to be okay, sometimes Perry Mason himself is like at risk. He's always at the murder scene somehow. At least in the episodes that I've seen, he's always like somehow too deep involved, and you wonder, will he get in trouble this time? Will this be the ending of Perry Mason? You know it won't be, but like somehow it actually like gets you going.
Yeah.
And I just think that even though there are moments where it's like, and then it's too cookie cutter, or things just move a little too fast. I think that,
Oh,
or
you thought
they
show-
get
I-
solved, not move too a little too fast. They get
I was
solved a
gonna
little too
say.
easily,
Okay, fine. That I agree.
without me, the audience, being involved in how Perry Mason got there. There are some times where he's like, "It's not her, it's her," and then it's like, "Wait a minute, who was that woman? I didn't see you." Or that moment where like it clicked for you, like it didn't click for me. How do I know that it clicked for you? Stuff like that. That I think. Like shows like Murder She Wrote had, where it's like, that's right, Jessica, it was him because he did say
Wait,
that. You don't really experience that with Perry.
No, I happen to agree with you. I think that tends to be well. I think part of that has to be keep in mind, like, all right. So if you didn't know this about the show, I found out. This show is actually they had a lot of lawyers who practice law who were consultants for the show, right?
Mm.
So this show actually really was focused on its authenticity, kind of making sure that like the way these crimes were solved could happen in court for
Yes.
real, right? So because of that level to that attention to detail, it does give this show so I think that's where your complaint comes in, right? It's just like, oh, a lot of these things seem so like kind of they just fall into place. I think the reason for that is because if they don't, it wouldn't necessarily stand up in court, and I think those lawyer consultants would like call them out on it.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there were so many times too where they were just so on top of like, I can't do this because of this law reason and this and this and objection on these grounds and all this stuff. And it was just like, oh my God, this is like really well written in that aspect.
Yeah.
But I do have complaints about the show. I was entertained and I did like it, but I'm a big fan of older stuff. I personally love it. And for someone who does prefer older, when I say older, I mean from like the 1920s to the 1970s. Those are my eras. I was surprised at how cold I found it. I didn't really... Perry Mason, apparently in the books, you don't really know much about him. He's established when we meet him, and we don't spend a lot of time on his character. And the show kind of takes that route. And as much as Raymond Burr is great, he's like a really unique-looking human being.
Oh, he is, right?
He is. He's got
agree.
great facial features. He doesn't try to advance the character. He's just kind of like a by-the-books guy. We don't really know anything about him, and it makes it kind of hard for me to root for him. Because I don't really know anything about him. What I could even think that he's like committing these crimes like on the side. Like how are you so good at this? Because you commit these crimes yourself. So it's just like,
because he loves defending innocent people who might be wrongfully convicted. I don't understand.
yes, it's it's almost like he's too much of like this picture perfect character. And the show is also like, they don't ever I can't even like give it to the fact that it's the 50s. Like they don't ever give him flaws.
You say 50, all right, but television?
But I mean, I not dabbling too much in television. I've dabbled way more in film, but I do feel like, being that this is the era that also the Twilight Zone came out, television wasn't completely... Now, they're two different television shows,
I was gonna say,
but
yeah,
they were capable of it. Like, that's the
It's-
thing. It's like...
I guess all right. So I can't say I'm not like a television historian, but I'm trying to think of other shows that were during the 50s. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like Leave It to Beaver.
Yes. I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners, The Dick Van Dyke Show, but these are comedies.
It was fair. I mean, I can't say that I know a lot of dramas that may have had longevity as, I guess, Perry Mason.
Yeah.
So nothing really comes to mind. Like the ones that
There were a
start
lot
coming
of
to mind-
Western shows back then. There were like Gunsmoke. The Westerns were a huge thing, right?
Really? Oh, I didn't know. Like Bonanza?
Huge. Bonanza too, yes.
Okay. I only know that from the Simpsons.
Rawhide. Gunsmoke lasted for over 20 years. So I'm going to focus on Gunsmoke and James Arness as Marshal Matt Dillon, which I have seen
Okay.
because I love Westerns. That show, I think, actually is a little better for this argument too, because watching a lot of episodes of Gunsmoke, there have been times that the character of Marshall Matt Dillon was challenged, and he wasn't always on the right side of the law, and he was a really well built character who was flawed.
Mm-hmm.
So, being that there's a Marshall in the 1880s, and then there's Perry Mason, a lawyer in 1950s, I feel more for this guy who lives in a time that I never belonged to. I don't know anything about, but I feel more connected to him than Perry Mason.
Okay.
And I do think it has to do with the 1950s ideas of the nuclear family and conformity. And just, it was a really, really hard time. America was kind of falling to pieces with letting fear control them.
Right.
And then like their values were being questioned. And, you know, I don't know if you know this, but Raymond Burr was a closeted homosexual.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. I did know this. Yes.
You found that out?
A closeted homosexual. Had an ex-wife, right?
He did have one ex-wife, but he also fabricated an ex-wife and a child that had died in a plane crash to make up for the fact that he was later in life bachelor, and that usually is like, oh, he's gay. So he's like, no, I'm not gay. I'm a widower.
Don't we all do that?
Yeah.
I think I did that in high school. I'm just like, yeah, I have a girlfriend. She's like in Canada.
She's in
though.
Canada, yeah. So like everyone has like.
She was in a plane crash. She's still missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She could be alive. She just hasn't contacted me. So it's just like, this is the time where, you know, to be yourself, to be against the status quo and these heteronormative, pretty much like rules and values, you know, you had to make up stuff just so that you could like not even be looked at. You know, this is the witch hunt era of the McCarthy era.
The McCarthy era, yeah.
So this is kind of like also socially scary time. So maybe I'm being a little too harsh because I know exactly what was happening. But also the show didn't really take it upon itself to, you know, challenge anything.
Well, I would say the most revolutionary thing about this show might be the fact that all right, again, I don't know my TV history as well as I should, because I think when you go into film school, you study film, not television, right? Television was up until very recently, maybe in the last like 15 years, like TV was kind of looked at like less than film, and now the tables are kind of turning. However, with that said, to my understanding though, like there has always been this connection between television writing, and its portrayal of cops as always being upstanding, always being right, always being correct. And the reason for this actual connection, and I listened to a great podcast about this that we'll add to the show notes, but the reason for this connection was because there was a TV show that started writing when they started writing cops in a negative light and stuff, so there was like a bad PR campaign against it. And so as a result, like cops used to like be, again, like your show had lawyers who were consultants. Cops used to do that for TV shows to add authenticity to cop shows. They kind of revolted and stopped because once cops started getting shown in a negative light, right? I think especially in film was that would eventually happen. But I think TV studios took it upon themselves to kind of rebuild the relationships and kind of always put cops front and center as good guys. This show, I'm not saying it ever portrayed cops as bad guys, but it did present them, as you mentioned, inept. It did present them as sometimes trying to, again, just solve the crime and not necessarily, like, there is a difference between solving a crime and getting justice, right? And I think this show really focuses on those ideas where, you know, just because you arrested someone does not mean that they are guilty. And I think doing that for a TV show, like specifically, like, I mean, the reason The Perjured Parrot was such a good episode for me was outside of the fact that it had a parrot that was constantly saying the name of the suspect who would be arrested for the crime, right? Perry Mason had to figure out why, what you know, the history of this, not the history of the parrot, but like why is this parrot saying this name and stuff, and ultimately come obviously to the exoneration. I think because of that, right? Again, it's just not necessarily, I'm not saying that this show put cops in bad light. What I'm saying is just like it didn't necessarily say that they are good people. In its own way.
It definitely made you kind of look like, oh, corruption can happen. Corruption, like cops aren't just perfect men in uniform who always do their job. And that just always questioning relationships that we deem to be like sacred is always a great thing, in my opinion. I did read about this Perry Mason episode in where he was accusing a man in uniform of committing a murder.
Ooh,
and it turned out, yeah. And then like the the men in uniform I don't know why I'm saying it like that. The police officers had a really bad relationship with the whole episode, and they were trying to frame him or something like that. And then there's this big confrontation with a man in uniform.
Oh,
Didn't
that's
find
right.
the episode.
Okay,
Did you see it?
I haven't seen that one, but I'm familiar with it too. That showed up on my list, right? So Perry Mason
Yeah.
himself gets what's it called, possibly embroiled as an actual suspect.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. There's also one where
So-
he's defending his what's his name? I forgot. He's the guy, his other investigator friend, Patrick.
Paul Drake.
But yes, him, right? Paul Drake
Yes.
himself got
Mhm.
got himself in some hot water where he himself becomes a suspect, and he's trying to prove he didn't commit a murder.
Yeah. I
So-
mean, what this show is good for is that it created this formula that works, and it still works.
It does
Um,
still work. I mean, let's be real.
They can't all like challenge the status quo.
Of course, as for the show that's the first,
Yeah.
I think it's still, and it has a longevity, right? So obviously, Law and Order SVU has lived longer, but
Yes, it has.
it just shows you these shows are quite popular. Oh,
They
hang on.
are.
I will say this: fine, SVU may have lived longer, but like Perry Mason and this character played by Raymond Burr lived on
Mhm.
for like what 20 like TV movies.
TV specials and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so-
Up until his death.
Yeah, so so he never came out of the closet ever, right?
Not
Not
no, I
officially?
don't think so. I mean, not officially. You know,
I
he
think
lived
his-
with his partner
For, like,
and had
30
a
years.
winery. Yeah.
Of course. Well, there you go.
There you go.
If that's the scream homosexual,
I
don't
think
know
though
what
he
does.
like defended his son, whether or not he existed, I don't know, but he defended the existence of the son that died in a plane crash. I think up until his death. So,
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
it does a number to you. I think even Liberace was like, "I'm not dying from AIDS. What are you talking about?" Up until his death. So.
Why are you
some people
laughing
just
at that?
deny it.
You're
because
laughing at a
it's
man
like-
dying from AIDS.
More
and you're
so
still
it's like-
laughing.
More so that why are you denying that you're gay? We know
Yeah.
you are.
You know, come on. You well, I as someone who's in the closet, I understand what that's like, right? Like kind of fighting that stigma tooth and nail.
Yeah.
It's shitty, but
It is
I get
shitty.
it. I understand. And these are older guys from a different era.
Definitely.
And, you know, their careers were literally based around the idea that they can land women.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, just the nuclear family, man, wife,
Mm-hmm.
daughter, son, and dog.
What did you think of the theme song for the show? Did you
I
on
kind
your
of
YouTube
love
video?
the theme song.
The theme song is good. I think
Yeah.
it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like you kind of do hear notes of it in the new show, right?
A little bit. Yeah.
It's like inspired by, but not directly an exact replica.
it's not. Well, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like something that was its contemporary. It sounds like the theme song to Dragnet. Do you know the Dragnet song?
I don't know the Dragnet song.
It goes like this. Bum ba-dum bum.
Oh, I do know that song.
Bum bum bum. So it's kind of
Okay.
like that. Like I don't know which came first. I should probably look that up. But there's similarities that I
Okay.
see there. And Dragnet's a police procedural show.
Yes.
I will say one thing. You know, in all of those seasons, why didn't Hamilton Berger give up his job as district attorney? He always lost. He was just like gung ho and like, one of these days I'm gonna prove Perry Mason wrong, and I don't think he ever did.
Well,
to
we
my
don't know.
knowledge.
We don't know how he did with the other cases. Maybe
Yeah.
there were. I guess that's the other thing, right? Like there's inept lawyers out there who can't fight the inept DA.
Yeah. Although I
You
love
know?
that actor. You know, I was kind of rooting for him in
Yeah.
some of those episodes because Perry's kind of cold.
Yeah,
compared
the
to
other thing I was going to say about the show that I just wanted to mention was I actually do.
Mhm.
I think that the show. Again, I'm not someone who's a fan of like anything before the 80s. Usually, I'll even be honest, before the 90s.
That's my
sometimes.
cutoff.
Right.
This is perfect.
We're the opposite.
We
But I think this show was actually very well shot.
It was.
Like I think it's
so
a
too.
gorgeous. It's like that's one of the things that I think still holds up. Like its visuals
Definitely.
are still kind of very very beautiful, well
Mhm.
lit, and you know I feel like that's such a cheap thing to say sometimes, but like the truth is like lighting is so important, especially it looked like it was shot in film.
It
Can
was
you-
shot on film.
Okay, it was shot on, yeah,
100%
go.
was shot on film.
and you can tell, and it has a
Mhm.
texture that just still holds up.
yeah.
You can still watch that show and still be like, oh, that same thing. Twilight Zone is a great example. We've talked about this, right? You could tell whenever they shot on video versus whenever they shot on film. There's a
Yes.
texture to it,
There
and
is.
you know you have to light it the right way, otherwise it will look flat. And this show had all those points that it hit, and I appreciated the show for that.
Oh, 100. I agree with you, and I don't care what anyone says. You can tell the difference between film and between digital or video, and
Oh,
film
yeah.
is just absolutely superior.
That might be one of my complaints for the new Perry Mason.
Yes.
which I think
Well-
is an excellent segue.
That is a good segue. Damn it. I had a good segue too.
Oh, what was your segue? We'll try to
Well,
use.
I was gonna say that maybe I'm a little too harsh on Perry Mason because Perry Mason was a show that was alive in the 50s that was talking about the 50s. But
Mhm.
this new Perry Mason is a show in 2020 that is looking back on 90 years ago. And sometimes it's easier for you to criticize an era when you don't belong to it, especially when you're in the 50s. You can't really criticize it.
Okay.
So
Oh, that's right. I guess we should. That is important. I don't. The Perry Mason books, right? Are
Mhm.
they? They're All right. We
They
never
were
read 'em.
contemporary to its era.
So they started being written in the 30s.
hmm
All right. So they were contemporary to the 30s, and then like as he continued
Yeah.
to age, like he would just keep up with like the current trends in law and whatever, right?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Because the show was strictly 1950s, right? It wasn't like a
Mhm.
period piece. It was just like this is
Nope.
the 1950s now. All right. And now then we go to 2020. Actually, before we actually do jump into that, I will say the one thing. All your episodes, I'm assuming no people of color.
No.
No,
Not that
same.
I saw.
On mine.
Not at all.
No, not one single person of color.
Not
Which
one person.
I think is one of the major differences also coming up in the HBO.
A big difference.
So let's talk HBO.
Mr. Mason, certain matters require discretion and finesse. That's the kind of thing you're good at. Wear your good suit.
This is my good suit.
Perry Mason for HBO was created, and I think a lot of their episodes were solely written by the two men, Roland Jones and Ron Fitzgerald.
Okay.
They're two writers. I know they both worked on Friday Night Lights, and they've worked on other shows that we all are familiar with, like Weeds and Boardwalk Empire.
Oh, so this one does have a very Boardwalk Empire
It
film
does.
feel.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good. Oh, it depends what season we're talking about. But did you ever see Friday Night Lights?
No, I have no interest in anything football related.
Neither do I. Eddie?
No, either.
No. Okay. Interesting. All right. So I might be the only one who's seen a couple episodes. It's actually good because it's not just football is like a small portion of it. It's more like about the
The
I mean, it had an
people in
excellent
town.
cast.
and the town and like,
I
it's
saw
an
the Amy
ensemble.
Schumer spoof of Friday Night Lights, which was pretty hilarious in my
What-
opinion.
Oh, I gotta check it out. I didn't see
Yeah.
this.
Because
Okay.
it implies that rape is very much a part of football culture.
I wouldn't. I mean, high school football culture probably. Yeah.
Maybe. So I don't know if the show like has a lot of episodes that were focused around that or
I
not.
can't
just-
say the episodes that I've seen were, but like I wouldn't be surprised if there were. You know.
Yeah.
So
But anyway,
back to Perry Mason.
this is pretty new, guys. It premiered on June 21st, 2020 on HBO, and I think the season finale just aired, so you can binge it. It is all available on HBO Max.
If you have
Bastards.
HBO Max, because they're
If
not
you
on.
have it.
Wait, no, hey God, don't say bastards. If you have HBO, you still get HBO Max.
Do you? Well, I don't know. They went from HBO Go to HBO Max, and it's just like, yeah,
They are. It's confusing, but everyone, if you guys do have Roku or Amazon and you can't get HBO Max, I suggest you go to Twitter and you complain to them because I have
Mhm.
I have Roku, and the fact that I still can't get HBO Max on my Roku is so annoying. I had to go to my cable box and look at on demand. Like, what year is this? 1998? I can't do that.
First
I
world
won't.
problems, man.
Oh, it is a definition of first world
The tragedy.
problem.
So the creators of the show, they read some books of the Eric Gardner Stanley franchise, and they decided purposely to set it 2 years before the first book takes place, which is 1933. So this series takes place in 1931, and
So
it
it's a
kind of is
prequel.
like, yes, even
31? 32.
31.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure it's 30.
Oh,
or
wait, no.
maybe
I think it starts 31
into 32.
And yeah, because New
Yeah.
Year's, New Year's.
Yes, absolutely, you're right.
Duh.
Oh man, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, it was. So this is technically considered a reboot, but
Okay, fair.
it's not only a reboot; it's a complete reimagining of Perry Mason,
Well, we
which
don't know
I
if
think is
yeah, I mean, he might become a
just
lawyer.
important to point out.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. So it's like
This is
you
a
know,
major
let's talk
difference.
about who the books don't talk about who Perry Mason was.
Mhm.
We don't know really much anything about it. It's implied that he was in the Navy, I think, at one point. Other stuff. So this TV show kind of takes the fact that there's not that much known about who Perry Mason was and runs with it. It freaking sprints with it.
Yeah.
So. Sorry, sometimes things don't come to me that easily. So it deals with a Lindbergh-esque case.
yes.
A child's kidnapping.
Yes. I mean, who doesn't love a
and-
good child's kidnapping?
Okay, You got to stop with the child
I'm just
No,
saying.
Yeah.
stuff.
Don't say anything else about children.
Don't say stuff like that. And just like in Perry Mason, the 50s TV show, it begins with the crime and how it happened. It's more elusive though as to who commits it. Even though we do know more than Perry Mason does.
We do. We know like the
Initially.
players, but I think
Yes,
we don't see the crime. We see the endings of the crime. We don't.
we
actually
see the endings
yeah.
of the crime.
Okay.
And a child was kidnapped by a pretty average family, not a family of repute or anything, for $100,000, which in the 30s is a lot.
Yeah, that's right. What, like $1 million?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there's got to be a calculator.
Almost.
Hang on.
Or maybe, if not, $250,000, which is still a lot.
Okay, go ahead. I'm gonna look it up to see if I can find it. But go on.
Okay. And when the swamp happens and they receive their child, the child has not only been murdered, but the eyes have been stitched open. So we immediately know that this is not going to be an episodic series where every episode we're following a different case. This is going to be the story for the whole season. If not the whole season, maybe the entire series. It's going to continue on. A lot of things
Yeah, I would
get
agree.
kind of introduced also in the first episode that kind of disappear in the next coming episodes. I haven't finished it. Like I said, we've only seen at least the first 5. But like Perry's relationship with Hollywood. So I think Hollywood's going to play more of a factor in certain episodes, and I think more so just Hollywood.
You think so?
His life as a farmer
Okay.
and his life in the war kind of alluded to. Maybe that might play in more, but it's really just focusing. The next coming episodes focus on this case.
Gotcha. All
He's
right.
hired as the investigator for a lawyer, E.B. Johnson. Continue, Rolando.
I just wanted to say, okay, so $100,000 in 1931,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been worth today $1,704 and
Wow.
$611.
That's
So
a
yeah,
lot.
$1,704,611 and 84 cents if you guys want to get technical. So yeah, so there you go. So almost $2 million. Is a baby's life worth $2 million? Some might say yes.
Oh my God! Don't
Some
say
might
anything
say-
else. Don't say anything else.
You gotta stop.
Don't say anything else. Just
So
stop.
go on.
So he's hired as a private investigator to a lawyer, E.B. Jonathan, not Johnson, played by John Lithgow, who is going to take on in the defense of these parents because everybody thinks that they did it. It just does not add up.
Well, yeah, he's hired by someone from this church cult in the show, which I still have like.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm also like 5 episodes in, and I'm still like, kind of, what is this? I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's like it looks like Scientology, but like from the 1930s almost.
kind of. Yeah,
But they're
It's
they're Christian. That's the only difference.
the Radiant Assembly of God.
Oh, that's a good name though. And
Mhm.
it's
The Rag.
figurehead is played by Tatiana Maslany,
Uh-huh.
and who great.
Amazing,
Maslany?
amazing actress.
Yeah,
She's fantastic.
yeah, she
She's
was
my
great.
favorite character.
But anyway, so yeah,
Best known
He-
for Orphan Black.
yes, Orphan
yes.
Black.
Mhm.
So it is a member of the congregation, one of the higher ups. He is the one who hires EB for this case, right? So he's the one who's funding this, and
Yes.
you know, I don't know if we want to get into the weeds of this, giving details because this is a mystery.
If it's necessary. But
I would say like from the plot line, all you
maybe
need to know
not.
is that what's it called? EB is hired to defend this woman, who, or
the
I'm
couple,
sorry, defend the
Emily
couple, defend the
Dodson
couple
and Matthew Dodson, yes.
for the murder of the son. Because what happens is when they trade the money for this kidnapping, the most horrific thing I think I've seen on TV is when they flip over the baby and his eyes are like kind of sewed open. And I'm just like, ew,
Yeah, yeah.
ew. This movie, actually,
It-
this show had a lot of gruesome moments. That
It does. It
surprised at.
immediately sets up that this is going to be a dark show.
It's dark and
and
gritty, which is what
Dark
you want
and
in your
gritty, which
in your
is
reboot.
also, yeah, just like also like, oh, okay, you're exactly like every other reboot.
well
But that's what people like.
product of its time.
Yeah. And also I did like the fact that it kind of got into the also the nitty gritty of Hollywood back then.
Mhm.
You know, this is my era, so I know a lot about stuff. You know, the character that we are introduced to him on, when we first meet Perry Mason, he's supposed to get bad pictures of a famous comedian at the time, an overweight comedian. And that is definitely given to Fatty Arbuckle, who we might famously know was on a rape trial for Virginia Rapé. And it's still really
What?
elusive as
I
to
didn't
whether or
know
not he
this.
did this. Yeah, I mean, old
Oh.
Hollywood has some scandals, and that is one of the
okay.
biggest one. And it also, leads into the dirty secret private lives of Hollywood stars, which,
Okay.
we're coming now. I'm actually really happy that right now people are starting to realize we should not celebrity worship and that these people probably are flawed and probably partake in like bad things that, we can't just like blindly be fans of people because one, you don't fucking know them and they're capable of anything. So I'm really glad that's happening right now in culture.
You think that's happening
We
right now
need
in
a
culture?
shift. Mm-hmm.
Maybe. All right, go on. Expand upon that. I mean, like how?
With the Ghislaine, is it Ghislaine or Ghislaine Maxwell
Oh,
and Jeffrey Epstein findings?
Yeah, that's not
Ghislaine.
I don't know.
And-
I don't know. But
Well,
I'm
that's
familiar
just
with.
all famous people. Ellen DeGeneres right now is kind of collapsing just because people are like, oh my God, she's mean. It's like, why is that such a shock that a person is capable of being mean? Just because she's like built a career on being quote unquote nice. Like, no, like don't be so heartbroken and devastated over this.
I was
she's a
heartbroken and
human being.
devastated.
Well, then you shouldn't have been.
Yeah. I mean, the other scandals surrounding the show are a little more, but it's not necessarily surrounding Ellen herself.
No,
so-
not Ellen herself. But
just
I
saying.
don't. Who knows if the show will survive? I'm just like other people, Ansel Elgort, other people getting quote unquote canceled. I'm not a fan of cancel culture, but I am a fan
Ooh,
of people
Ansel-
realizing.
Ansel?
Ansel,
How's that
yeah.
going to affect? How's that going to affect West Side Story? That we're going to
I
have
don't
to
know.
forcefully watch.
Yeah, me too. I
can't
hope
wait. So
it
I get to
cancels
see.
it.
I get to see that movie. I get to see that movie with angry eyes and be like, I hate this movie because of Ansel and all these other reasons, but Ansel's number one.
Number one.
Uh,
I do want to say that I'm not the biggest fan of cancel culture, but I'm a fan of people looking critically at other human beings, especially those who we put on a pedestal. I'm not a fan of hegemony, and I think our relationship needs to change, and that's why I say these things. So
all right. I agree with you in terms of
Mhm.
celebrity culture. I'm actually more fascinated though now with influencer culture,
yes,
which I
yes.
think is the one that's kind of getting a reckoning at the moment, and I'm
too.
here for it. That is, I follow all those Instagram accounts that are kind of exposing these influencers, and they're my favorite thing. It's so delicious, so scandal. But yeah, so
I know
back
there's
to
so much cheese made these days, but
back to the 1930s scandals of the time.
yes. So Perry, he lives alone. We know a lot about his character this time. He lives alone on his old farm that pretty much he's being rented out now to a woman who is his lover, who's one of my favorite characters. And he works with another man, Pete Strickland. And they're just like trying to make ends meet here. They're not really in it for any moral, reason, or they're just trying to make ends meet.
Well, yeah, at least his first case that we see him take on.
At
which
least
is-
that's how we are introduced to him
Yes.
as. And then when he gets hired by Evie Jonathan, he gets entroped into just like a huge case that is just more than it meets the eye. And I don't want to tell you more. You should probably watch it if you're interested.
Mhm.
But a lot unfolds.
Yeah.
But the character of Perry Mason, we find has a lot of PTSD from the war.
Mhm.
He is divorced and pretty much estranged from his family.
Mhm.
And he is what we would refer to as a hard-boiled character.
Yes.
He's just got a lot of issues that he's dealing with, and it results in sarcastic and not the best behavior sometimes, especially to people who have different beliefs than him, like say the people
Yeah.
of Rag. I call them Rag.
He's he's very self-destructive,
Yes, he is.
and we see this, and it's so interesting. You're
Mhm.
also fascinated by the Latina lady that he's like.
Veronica Falcon.
Yeah.
Is that her name? That's a
Yeah.
name.
That's a
okay.
great name. Yeah.
Wait, is that her
The
real life name or the character?
No, her
real life name. Her
Oh, her
character's
real life
name is Lupe.
She's so
She's so good.
she's so captivating.
She really captivates every scene she's in.
Yeah.
Not the most. All right. So I'll say this: not necessarily conventionally attractive, but like she oozes with sexuality, though, right?
She
that
does.
like
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
like it's just captivating you.
That confidence that
Mhm.
she radiates with is beautiful. That's actually I appreciate that about this show is that it takes place in Los Angeles
Mm-hmm.
and it takes place during the Great Depression. So one, we get a really
Just
good
before.
sense of just
Just
before.
before, yeah.
Just before.
Yeah.
We get a really good sense of the fact that they're in LA, there's the rich and then there's the poor.
Mm-hmm.
And we get a good sense of those who suffer from those who prosper.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of people they are. And then not only that, but we get a lot of diversity because it is Los Angeles. And even though there is diversity, it still adheres to
The
fact
social
that
constructs of his time. So we still see segregation, right? Because we do get not a B plot because it's kind of entwined with the A plot, but we do see our black beat cop officer who will be integral to the crime, at least the solving of the crime. I'm trying to think of the other.
Well,
Homophobia.
homophobia is present.
Homophobia.
You have the African American community living under the Jim Crow laws
Yeah, they're
and
segregated.
how that's affecting them. And in the beginning of, well, what we see, wanting to the social justice of that beginning, the seeds beginning to be planted in that.
Mm-hmm.
And now we
Yes.
see that within our police officer.
Which will, I mean, it's such a shame, right? We were watching the show and it's just like, man, like these conversations they're having in the 1930s is just like, well, these fictionalized conversations that were happening in the 1930s, but you know, they're still prevalent today. You know,
100%.
what a shame.
Perry Mason, who also is played by Matthew Reese. I
From
didn't
the
mention that.
Americans.
From the, okay.
Yeah.
I know.
It
show
was
with Kerry Russell?
almost Robert Downey Jr., who was originally
Yes,
supposed
almost
to
played
be
by Robert Downey Jr. And now he's just a producer.
executive
on
producer. Yeah.
Oh,
executive
that's
producer, yeah.
interesting. Oh, how would you
Yeah.
guys have felt if it was Robert Downey Jr. instead of Matthew Rice?
I'm so glad it's not Robert Downey Jr. I'll just
I'm
say
glad
that.
it's not him either. I kind of do wish it was someone more attractive than Matthew Rice. I guess I kind of want.
Yeah.
I feel like this character Perry Mason, if he's just a little more attractive, would be just again oozing with sexuality, right? Like kind of beaten down by
I guess.
society, but like he's like
Cole's
smoking
like, I guess.
I never thought of that.
I don't know. He has the potential to be hot, but like it's you
Mm-hmm.
see Matthew Rice's hair, and I'm just like ugh.
Yeah, I know. I actually kind of like that too because he's not conventionally attractive and his hair is just so unkept and
It
I
is.
really hate it. But that's also my hatred for it makes me like it because
I
that's
suppose.
true to his character. He's not very, well kept physically.
Yeah.
So anyway, I will go back to the fact that Perry Mason was discharged from the Navy with a blue ticket, which is usually reserved for, as they say on the show, undesirables, African Americans, and homosexuals.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do think after episode 2 it was because he probably mercy killed some of his fellow soldiers.
So, all right, I agree with you. However, every episode there was a gay reference or something
Mm-hmm.
that I had seen, right? So I'm starting to think that maybe Perry Mason is on
Bisexual.
the bisexual, pansexual side of things.
I mean,
I
he
mean-
pretty much admitted to it.
Yeah, he's like, I've only been queer once. I was just like, all right, I don't know what this means. Just HBO, tell me, is he
Yeah.
bisexual? Give
Yeah.
me a bi. I actually, I think that's
Or maybe because for him, what he really did was so much more horrible. Like being put in a position to have to kill his own men because of their suffering.
100%.
You know, this is like Band of Brothers moment, and he has to turn his gun not on the enemy, but his brothers that are crying out in pain that he can't help them.
Mm-hmm.
He can't help them. So the only thing he knows how to do is shoot him in the head to end their suffering. So I would say I would be like, yeah, queer once because I don't give a shit what you think of me. That's what Perry Mason is all about. I don't give a shit because I
Yeah.
think of myself so
'Cause I'm
much
so
more
broken.
worse.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fair. That's
He's
a fair
totally
point.
broken. And that's definitely well said, Eddie. I definitely agree with you on that.
Fine. So Perry Mason isn't in on the Rainbow Army, but
but
there
definitely
is a
would be
character who
fascinating.
is. Oh, I agree. But there is a
Definitely.
character who is.
There is, yeah. I don't really sexual identity doesn't really play a part in this show, but I'm so glad that they just threw in that little reference for Della, who I think is one of my absolute favorite characters.
Oh, she's great.
In this show.
Yeah. I think all the
Um,
women in this show shine so bright.
Mm-hmm.
Like from Emily, the victim
Yes.
of this crime,
To Alice.
Yeah, it's just
Mhm.
like it is the casting for the women and their performances, and I think it kind of is trying to make up amend for the books and the let's
Perhaps,
be
yeah.
real, the show, the
And for-
1950s, yeah,
Yeah.
like kind of
And
just
for just addressing things that have happened in this country
Mm-hmm.
and okay, we haven't seen anything in the 30s that accurately represent this and that, so let's do it now. So yeah, it makes up for a lot of stuff. My favorite thing though about that scene where we find out that Della is in a relationship with a woman is where she's like, everybody thinks Emily Dodson is guilty, and the girlfriend says something about it to Della, and Della says, "Well, imagine what would happen if you could be put on trial for what you do in your private life."
Right. Yes. And this,
And
yeah,
you know,
and
that's
that-
also just a really good point in general. You know, that's kind of sometimes why, you know, till this day, things kind of get carried away. You know, we're not putting their character on trial, and sometimes it feels like in society that's all we do.
And just to come
Um,
back to it, this is why Raymond Burr stayed in the closet for so long, right? Because you grow up
Exactly.
with this mentality, you know,
Mhm.
it has an effect, you know?
It does, yeah. And it just, you know, sometimes you forget how scary it is to be alive.
Absolutely. No, for sure.
So I
And
mean, yeah. So
it's so portrayed. It's so well portrayed. Every
Mhm.
time you have a situation where an African American is, every time you have a African American character meeting with a white character,
Mhm.
and there's that tension
Mhm.
in the air and the fear in their eyes.
Yeah. No, the scene where Paul Drake is threatened to lie on his report and then humiliated and talked down to by the white cops.
Wait, that
was
wasn't Paul
really-
Drake. Was he Paul Drake?
He's Paul Drake.
Wait, I thought so. Who's the white guy that he's working with? I thought that was Paul Drake.
No, that's Pete Strickland.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right, gotcha.
Yeah.
I messed that
And
up.
then you can see the fear in Paul's
Oh wait, so
eyes. You
since we know the
well, so we know that who Paul and Della are going to end up meaning to Perry.
yeah, uh huh,
Is that what you were going to say? Continue. with
yeah,
that
yeah.
thought,
That's what
sorry.
that's what I'm trying to say. It's just like okay, yeah. So this is kind of more or less a prequel.
Yes, it
to
is.
all right.
Yeah.
So I'm saying it's just like by the time where we left off, he's not a lawyer. He's just a private investigator. Do you think he's
Mhm.
gonna be? You know, I guess maybe he becomes a lawyer, and he starts forming his ragtag team of people who will defend wrongfully convicted or wrongfully tried people.
Yeah.
Which
Well-
would kind of make sense why the original Perry Mason was doing what he was doing.
Yes.
that was already part of
100%.
his-
Yeah.
Part of his bones, in his blood, to be an investigator.
Yeah, I mean that's as far as the books are concerned. That the books even say that he's like as much of an investigator, sometimes even more so than he is a lawyer, which is probably why he's so good at it.
Mhm.
And I definitely enjoy this idea of like the 1930s, a lesbian or a bisexual woman, you know, an African American man, and this totally traumatized guy, white guy out there doing deeds for the people. Like I'm actually about this, as you say, ragtag team. More so than the one in the 1950s one, because they just said they were just
Yeah, I get it.
Faced all the time.
Right.
And also in the original, I will say I did not like the way Paul Drake spoke to Della. Always was like coming
Well.
on to her and talking to her sexually, and I was
It's
just
the
like, oh my god, this
1950s.
is so 50s.
Yeah.
So aggravating though.
I think I was surprised it wasn't like a butt smack.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, like, hey, Toots, get your lovely ass in here. Or something like
Yeah.
that.
And
The
Dayla
way
just
they
being like,
talk to
"Oh,
you.
stop, you
That's
guys."
Yeah,
horrible.
like, oh, you like that, but
Yeah, because this Dayla would
No.
not take that shit by any means.
no, this Stella
No.
is so great. This Stella, I feel like, is more of the lawyer than EB was, and I also really loved that. This show does a really good job of character development.
Mhm.
You know, EB just kind of coming to terms with like he's too old and he's kind of like drifting, like he can't keep up with the world anymore. He's not who he used to be.
That is so. I that was a tragic kind of storyline for me too, because I
was.
think, I mean, we're like only in our 30s here, but like
Mhm.
let's be very honest, seeing like all these younger kids becoming millionaires off of TikTok is just like, I can't keep up with this world. This world is too fast for me. I must
Seriously,
build it. I must get my grave and be ready to
yeah,
to
it's
call it
really
quits in my
crazy.
career. You know,
By the time I'm 40.
by the time I'm 40.
But no, it just I think every character kind of has an arc and a story that they're all going on, and I think that it works really, really well, despite the fact that the show I think is a little long. These episodes run a little
Over an
over an hour,
Yeah.
and there are times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish this would be a little tighter. But there's so much development going on that they have to be that long.
Yeah.
Although
trying
there
to-
are times where they could have ended sooner than they did. Like that second episode when Emily gets arrested, it should have ended there. I don't know why it continued.
I don't know. I don't remember what happened after that, but that was such a good scene though, when she gets arrested, right?
Yeah,
Because
I
you
mean,
get that great speech from Tatiana's
Alice.
character. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Alice. Oh,
Sister
yeah, Sister
Alice.
Alice. Sister Alice.
yeah.
You get that great speech And then like as she's, they're having the funeral procession for her coming out of the temple, and there she gets arrested. Right, there's just this chaos ensues. I thought that was one of the most effective scenes I think that I had seen.
And it would have been an even stronger closer.
You're right. I think
it goes back to Perry being drunk.
Well, I mean,
and having another war.
That's his. Oh, you're right. That's where it ends on us watching the crimes. The butcher of Manchego Bay. I don't remember what it was, but that was his nickname. All right.
Yeah.
So.
Just I don't know. Another favorite character is Virgil.
Which was Virgil?
The man who works at the morgue.
Oh, the mortician.
The mortician.
I do like the mortician too, right?
The
poor guy. Yeah.
Poor guy wants adventure.
Some comedy in a really, really dark show.
I would agree. Man, let's talk about that darkness, right? Because
yes, it's very dark.
I mean, not just dark.
We're talking about film noir.
So film noir is actually like more so how you film it in terms of like, it's typically black and white, and it's, like shadows, like if you measure light, then you go a step under, stuff like that. And then it is also its characters. But again, film noir was created in an era where we had a code over us and we can only show so much. So it kind of had to like hint at those things. This show doesn't hint at it. It shows you everything. It tells you it and it shows it to you. And it's almost a little too much.
So this show though I think this show is shot like maybe one or two stops under what it needs.
Yeah.
With the exception of anytime maybe being outside. No, I would argue even sometimes outside when they're outside, unless it's taking place outside of the temple, it's always it seems to usually be shot like maybe one or two stops, and then for the non-film speaking people, I don't even know how to explain that. A stop is like how much light you let into the camera, right? If I remember correctly.
Like if it's well exposed or not. It's how to properly expose. Sometimes
I'm a
if
producer,
it's way too
guys,
bright and light comes
not a
in.
DP.
It's overexposed. If light comes in,
So
it's underexposed.
I think they do tend to shoot it, which is I think a stylistic choice for this show, right? It's also going for that kind of the milkier blacks, right, where everything's kind of more muted. We were talking about the film aspect of the original show, right? How beautiful it was, and I think this one kind of suffers a little from being digital, and you can tell it's digital.
And too played around with the color palette. I almost felt like it looks kind of like how you would look at like an old 1930s postcard with like colors like that, kind of like weird saturated colors.
That would be the thing, but. I guess what's it called? But what I did want to just say is just like, I don't know. I'm not saying that this is necessarily film noir, but I will say it is not film noir. It's kind of like maybe it might be new film noir. What would nouveau film noir? I just created it, guys. Patented. It's me. Thank you very much.
So I was reading something and about the writers, and they said, I want to quote the writers really quick.
Sure, go.
They said, "We realized we could go back to the source material and do a Chinatown sort of thing. We didn't have to remake the black and white Raymond Burr series. It became more interesting because it tapped into my love for the novels of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett." So that was kind of when I first began the show. Yeah, I was kind of upset that they were going. I thought that I was like, this is going more the route of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. This isn't what Perry Mason is. And at first, I didn't like it. Just because I was like, why are you calling it Perry Mason if this is more like Philip Marlowe or Sam Spade?
Mm-hmm. But I mean,
I've become more forgiving of it, but I do think that they 100% they are influenced and they're doing like these kind of characters, this kind of film noir tribute, but it's like half that and half Perry Mason procedural courtroom drama that will come and just like modern day mystery kind of thing. It's kind of like halfway in between. So
yeah, I would
get
agree with you.
Hints of it, but it's not fully that.
I think. All right. I don't know. I might be saying the statement, and you guys might disagree with me. But I think maybe the reason they went with the hard-boiled character is because we haven't had a hard-boiled character in a long time in media. What's the last hard-boiled character that you can think of outside of maybe Batman?
Define hard-boiled, please.
So the hard-boiled character tends to be what's it called? Kind of rough around the edges. Necessarily doing a job. Let's actually, you know what? Let's look up because this is all terminology that I learned in when we did film and literature in college. But hang on, what is hard-boiled in fiction, in detective fiction? Right. So the hard-boiled is a literary genre will carry over into. Okay, so people who are hardboiled tend to be often considered also anti-heroes.
Yes.
I wouldn't necessarily
There
call
we go.
this Perry Mason an anti-hero, but he's not this upright, upstanding citizen, right? I don't think I would not. He's a drunk. He's a bad father. I think we could say that. That's not like us kind of an opinion here. They say it themselves. Like he recognizes he's a bad father. Despite he tries hard. He tries his best. I'm not going to say that, but and I think because he's also so rough around the edges, he kind of falls into this hard-boiled thing. Now, what was the question?
I think
forgot how we got
I would
here.
question you on the whole bad father thing
How dare you? Go. Why?
because Perry Mason is a broken man going through a lot of shit, and of course maybe he's put his job above his family, which it seems to be what they're hinting at. He wants to be with his son. He wants to have that connection, and then you see who's the millionaire character in this.
The guy played by the Terminator. I forgot. I don't remember his name. Hammond.
Yeah.
Har-
Now
Har-
he's the father who has been denying his son.
The guy who played. He's the guy who hired EB the first
Yeah.
time. Who he turned out.
Baggerly.
Yeah.
Baggerly.
Thank you, Good for you. Remember these names. Wait, he is from the Terminator though, right?
Yes.
He's from the second one, yes.
Okay, yeah.
So
Uh,
then there's that father and son relationship going on.
That's true. A lot of daddy issues going on in the show.
So, okay, so to answer, have we seen a hard-boiled character? I mean, for a detective, maybe not. But I will say one thing that I kind of noticed where, in the 20th century in television portrayals of men, we got a lot of, Perry Mason's kind of a perfect example. We got a lot of unflawed portrayals. These are, men who are really great at their job, who also are loyal and great, father figures and don't cheat on their wives and aren't corrupt and everything. And I think that
Boring.
we saw that portrayal so much that once we got into the 21st century, we kind of needed to turn that like over its head.
Fair.
And we got a lot of portrayals of flawed men. We've been getting that since The Sopranos. We got Mad Men, we got Breaking Dawn, we got House of Cards. So many shows are doing the job that it's supposed to, where it's showing flawed people. It's
Well-
not necessarily showing bad people, but they're showing flawed people.
Well,
they're
okay,
showing
yeah, that's
flawed
where-
portrayals of men with power too.
I
Men
would-
with
alright.
power.
I disagree. So I ultimately think, but those people end up doing a lot of bad deeds. They fall
Well-
under more so, like if I had to put them on a scale, they tend to be, all these characters you mentioned on these TV shows tend to fall more so bad. Then good. So here we go. So Perry Mason falls on
So-
the alignment chart more so on the good, despite the fact that he is kind of,
Yes, I actually
Flawed.
yes, that's what I was getting with too, where it's like now we have a character who is flawed, but he's not a man of power.
Mm-hmm.
He is, kind of amongst us.
he's
In
an
the sense
underdog.
where he's an underdog. He's poor. He's not winning in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
So in that way, it's nice to see this portrayal of a flawed human being and also the anti-hero.
Yeah.
So that's something I haven't seen a lot of because I'm so tired of, flawed men with power portrayals. I don't want to see another one. And I was like, oh, great. Perry Mason he's not established.
He's not,
that
no.
was an
right.
exciting twist on it.
Okay, fair enough.
So, we really quick, guys. We're like at an hour and 11. Do we
Okay,
want to
gotcha,
start
right.
wrapping it up?
Yeah.
Let's start wrapping it up. Okay. So, we've talked a lot overall about the differences in the show, and not only in theme and in context, but in the way they handled a lot of things. So I kind of want to ask you, Rolando, did you think this was needed?
Yeah, this one was an easy answer. I think while I was watching it, I think this one was needed because it is introducing Perry Mason. Not, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it is introducing this character to a brand new generation of people, and there's been such distance between the Perry Mason that people know in the 1950s and all those TV movies, but that's kind of a generational thing, right? That's kind of like for that audience. Like between the 1950s to now, I think there was only one attempt at a reboot, and that was in the 70s.
Yeah, 1973. The
Okay,
new
yeah,
Perry
19
Mason.
There was
The
a
new
Perry
Perry
Mason.
Mason
Yes,
series.
15
and-
episodes.
Yeah, and that clearly didn't go anywhere. So yeah, it's not. I think this has like enough time span where I think it's okay, and they're trying to do something really new. So even if you were a fan of the original show, you're not being kind of boggled down by what you know of it because it is so different, right? That it kind of feels fresh. So yeah, I think it would be down. I think it came at a great time also, kind of between. We're in a pandemic now, so it's any new media is great media, but I think its message though of you know so we're kind of right now living through the Black Lives Matter movement, right? And the main goal of the Black Lives Matter movement is just against police brutality.
Mhm.
Not, I think it goes a step further than that. I think it's also about just police corruption and police protecting each other, to get away
Yeah.
with like their own crimes, even if they don't believe that what they're doing is crimes. I think majority of the U.S. will see it's just like this criminal activity you guys are covering up. I think the reason Perry Mason right here, this version of Perry Mason here works is because like it is so it is front and center the fact that he's not a man of the law. He's a man who's fighting for he's working for the people who are on the other side of the law, right? Who are
Mhm.
possibly getting, prosecuted by these corrupt cops or framed and stuff. And it's sensationalizing it. But the truth
Mhm.
is that this happens. We were literally watching a show. We were watching shows about these unsolved mysteries, but we spoke last episode about the problems that these kinds of that criminal justice itself has. So I think this show came at a right time. This character came at a right time to kind of
Mhm.
say it's just like cops aren't good. But again, it doesn't do it in a way that's like kind of condemning all cops. It's just saying it's just like there are flaws here. And we need to address them.
100%.
So yeah, I think needed.
That's good. Okay. I've been enjoying these HBO shows that we're covering, so I'm glad that,
Yeah, this is
Then-
our third, right?
our third.
Our third.
We covered Watchmen and we also covered His Dark Materials.
Uh-huh.
So I'm glad that, after the way that Game of Thrones ended, they're still able to
Well,
do
that's fair.
good stuff.
True.
So I kind of want to focus on the title of Perry Mason as a media property.
Okay.
And since, this is what we do. We cover remakes, reboots, and revivals. And guys, in case you didn't know that. And this is technically a reboot of Perry Mason, and there's absolutely nothing you can compare other than maybe somewhat of the character portrayals between old Perry Mason and new Perry Mason.
Mm-hmm.
So as a television show, I like it. I think it's quite good. I think it's a bit long, but I do think it's well written, and I enjoy it. It moves at a good pace. But aside from that, we've been talking a lot recently, I feel like, at least in the last year, about shows or movies that call themselves a property, and it's something completely new. It's something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it makes me sad or if it makes me a little disappointed that these shows need these property titles or these movies need these property titles in order to exist.
Franchising, yeah.
Yeah. I think that this isn't Perry Mason so far. I like how it's like slowly becoming it, but the show will probably end where, technically, if you want to consider it, where the 1950s Perry Mason begins. And I think that it doesn't bother me that it's called Perry Mason without having anything to do with Perry Mason, but it's a little sad that that's the only way it could exist in this day and age. It's calling itself Perry Mason and then being its completely own creation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for a courtroom drama, right, if you are someone who actually is familiar with the Perry Mason books and with the Perry Mason television show, I kind of think you will be disappointed because it's not what you are expecting from it.
Right.
It's not like a courtroom show of an established lawyer. It's something completely different. I guess for those fans, you would kind of say, then why call it Perry Mason? So I'm like, I want to say that I like the show, but I'm also thinking about it like that in the sense where we're getting so many reimaginings and stuff that it's like, I don't even understand why it's calling itself Perry Mason when I can't even see the family resemblance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's just something that from doing this, we're almost at 100 episodes. We've done so many of these things and I'm finding it more and more. And do I think it was a needed show? Sure, I'm enjoying the shit out of it, and I love what it's bringing to, our examination of our culture and our society and looking back at it in a 2020 lens at 1932, but also really seeing 2020 thrown back at you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm questioning whether or not it was necessary that it would needed to be under Perry Mason. You know, is it doing anything for this property? Was it needed to do it with? Did it need to take Perry Mason and make it this? I don't know if it did.
Yeah.
So that's my big thing.
I mean, you know, we've been complaining about this I know me for sure. I've been complaining about this for a while. I think the first time, like
Since Chucky, right?
Chucky, yeah, Child's Play would be the first time that
which was a year ago.
Wow, in no way. Oh God.
That was last summer, yeah.
But yeah, so Child's Play is that prime example where you don't. Did I need this Chucky name? I guess the reason I don't think that for this is because these two properties are so far removed from each other. Like they're so far in time that, you know, the people who enjoy the original Perry Mason, I don't think this is. I don't think they know about this show, to be honest, right? Because if you remember when we were talking about this with our guest last week, Charlie,
yeah,
we meant not last episode, we said it's just like, oh yeah, there's a Perry Mason reboot that's out there, and she's just like, what? Like, when does this coming out? It's just like, it's already in progress. I think we were like mere weeks away from its season finale, right?
Yeah.
And it's weird, right? HBO didn't do this good this job of like kind of promoting it, like saying Perry Mason. When I found out about it, I just found out about it because I happened to be watching HBO and they were just like Perry Mason, and I was just like, wait, isn't this a remake of some sort? And I had to Google and then I texted you all excited. I was just like, oh look, HBO has a new one out. So I guess it's not necessarily relying on that Perry Mason name, at least not marketing purpose wise, right?
Yeah.
Which I think tends to be the problem with some of these other properties. Like Child's Play had that problem where they were marketing as a Child's Play movie, and when you're going to go see a Child's Play movie, you're expecting something, and then it gives me something different, something I liked, but something I just wish didn't need to have the Child's Play name. This, on the other hand, you know, as someone who is 33, younger than the original target audience for the original Perry Mason, I have no idea what Perry Mason is, right? So I'm going in there with kind of fresh eyes, not sure what it is. If I choose to look up Perry Mason, I don't know what I'll be. Yeah, well, that's not true because I started watching this one first before I started watching the new one, and I could appreciate the old one, and say it's just like, okay, I understand. I'm not gonna keep watching this. This new one is one that's kind of getting my attention. So I don't know. I guess I'm just saying it's just like, I guess because they didn't market this such as like Perry Mason, like every Perry Mason fan is gonna want to watch this. I think that might kind of be why I might be more forgiving for this.
I do think there is a degree of trying separating itself from that. It's like, oh, we are Perry Mason, but like we're not trying to appeal to, you know, those who know this because this isn't really that. I think it also has to do with the fact that HBO viewership has not, you know, it's kind of gone down since the rise of Netflix and stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm certain.
But we're also two young millennials who are not really familiar with the original Perry Mason. I do wonder what an older generation who did grow up with it. I would like to hear their opinion. So if you're listening, please share because we really want to hear from you. If you fit into that demographic, share your thoughts, please. Where can they reach out to us, Rolando?
So you guys can email us. Our email is remakesrebootsrevivals@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on Instagram. Our handle is Remakes Reboots Revivals. And we're also on Facebook. And Twitter, I am tweeting a little more. You may have just seen me tweet angrily about the fact that the creators of Avatar have left the Netflix reimagining.
That's not good.
It's never a good sign, but I think I have my opinions. And you know what? Drop me a tweet, and if you want to hear them, I'll go on a rant. But no, so yeah, and you can find us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Remakes Podcasts, and I think that's it, right? Yeah, those are it. You can also visit us on our website to reach out to us directly. www.remakesrebootsrevivals.com. Yeah, we don't promote the website enough.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we have a website. Go visit it.
Go check it out.
Awesome. Okay.
Find all the episodes.
Sweet. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, stay unoriginal.